Welcome in. It's Big Ten Today. We're presented by Old National Bank. It is great to have you with us on this Wednesday. Dave Revson and Trent Meacham. NCAA tipped off yesterday with the first four, so we got a little bit of a taste of it. The Big Ten obviously starts tomorrow. We had 3 NIT games involving the Big Ten yesterday, so we're getting there. We're inching closer here.
The taste was pretty good last night. Both those games came down to a single possession game in the final second, so I think that's setting up for what could be a really exciting tournament. And I'm excited about these Big Ten teams. There's a lot of distinct styles of play, which I think could suit them well. And it was interesting, Coach Weber told me over the weekend at the Big Ten tournament, he said that this year he thinks the Big Ten teams will be better prepared because they faced more unique styles of play than maybe in years past.
Interesting. All right, well, we will hope that he is correct as we get to our big story, and it is the Purdue Boilermakers, the top seed in the East. They are the 5th Big Ten team to earn a 1 seed in the last decade. Of the previous 4, only one of them made it to the Final Four. Wisconsin came within an eyelash, of course, of winning it all back in 2015. It's the Boilers' 4th ever 1 seed and their first since 1996. So our thought here today, Trent, was to touch on every Big Ten team, maybe a little less so about the matchups than we've done in the past few days, though I think it's inevitable to touch on those at least a little bit. But just get a thought from you on each one of these teams and what it would take for them to make a deep run. So let's start with Purdue, which, as far as the bracket lays out, is expected to make a deep run. What do they need to do to fulfill that expectation?
There's a few things, what they need to do and why I think they're dangerous. It starts, we all know, handling pressure. Okay, speaking of Coach Weber, every player and coach that he interviewed after those games, hey, he asked, do you work on your press breaker? Of course they do. Here's what I'd like to see them do, though. I think they have too many players in the backcourt trying to get the ball, and they're kind of stuck in the coffin corner. I'd like to see them bring more guys in the front court, have better spacing, and maybe bring Zach Edey. You know, you have a 7'4" guy, strong, a poised player, the best target. Get the ball into him. He's a good free throw shooter as well. Then let those guards run off of him. But handling pressure is so important for Purdue. They have not done that. Now they've still won games, still won the Big Ten Conference tournament, so let's give them some credit. But I think maybe there's something strategically I'd like to see Matt Painter do.
Help me understand where you would put Zach Edey in the press break.
Well, I would probably say just Edey and Braden Smith up in the backcourt. Have Edey pick for Braden Smith, give him more space to catch the ball, and then Edey run back the other way, make himself known right in the middle or the opposite side of the court, not too deep. He's the best target they got. That's what I would do. You could bring in a third guy once they get some spacing, but just open up that space of the floor. So there's one strategic thing I think they could do, but I also like them advancing, and you've touched on this, Dave, is Zach Edey is as dominant of a force, and teams that haven't seen him, they haven't seen anybody like him. You can't prepare for that. Like you can't prepare for pressure, you can't prepare for Zach Edey. And so I think that bodes well for Purdue. Finally, I'd say the play of David Jenkins is of late. Another ball handler, an experienced guy, can make shots. I think that is really crucial for them. And then I'll throw in an X factor, though, of Brandon Newman. He gives them some athleticism on the perimeter. He can make shots. Had 19 against Illinois in their last regular season game. Had 15 in the Big Ten tournament against Ohio State. Now, the other 2 games there, he wasn't too much of a factor.
Yes.
But he is an X factor, Dave. And I think if he can give them a boost on offense and provide some athleticism defensively, that's really important for them.
Right, because we've seen the high end of their backcourt of Lawyer and Smith. And when those guys are playing well, not only are they good, I mean, they can be a net plus for Purdue. They've won some games for Purdue this year. But I think the challenge is the youth and the inexperience and maybe hitting that proverbial wall this time of year and being in a situation you haven't been in before. You would know far better than I would, but it seems to me just having Newman and having Jenkins is such a luxury, and it feels like Matt Painter's made a decision here to utilize them a little bit more, not to become totally reliant on them. Certainly you're going to have Smith and Lawyer out there. They're a huge part of what you do. Smith is your starting point guard, but this sense of, hey, these guys have been through a lot more college basketball than the other two, have been in pressure situations, and maybe they can help us win, which we saw both of them do over the course of the weekend.
You nailed it. We talk so much about their youth, but they do have some experience there in the backcourt. And I think it just sets up really well for David Jenkins to see those shots go in that environment, and for Brandon Newman to have success in the recent games. I think that's really crucial for them. I like how they're playing. And I've said it all year, I love Braden Smith. I don't care if he's a freshman. I think he's a gamer. He's tough. And then you got Zach Edey to play through. So I like their chances. I actually think Florida Atlantic, everyone's talking about Memphis. I think Florida Atlantic is going to advance. I think the key, though, is Duke. They've already played them. I think Duke is underseeded as a 5 seed. They're going to be a tough one.
We talked about this yesterday. It's a very different Duke team than the one they manhandled in November, which isn't to say they can't beat them again. I just think the shock and awe is gone, right? Because Duke has faced Zach Edey before, and they're just playing so much better. They're young players. Give them a ton of credit. Have really developed here. And the Duke team that we saw down the stretch is a different one than we saw in November. So it would be a different challenge for Purdue. Again, they beat them very handily earlier in the year. If there is one Big Ten team that is synonymous with this time of year, it is Michigan State and Tom Izzo. They're in this 7th spot. They made the Final Four from the 7th spot before. What would it take for Michigan State to make a run?
Well, I want to see them play faster, and they got to make shots. This is a good 3-point shooting team, really laid an egg at the Big Ten tournament. I was disappointed with their effort against Ohio State. Now, give Ohio State a lot of credit, but they got to make shots. I like them, though, in March. Of course, Tom Izzo, but across the board, this is an experienced team, and they're a very skilled team. It's not your typical Izzo team. They're not going to beat you up on the boards. They're not going to dominate physically like they oftentimes do. But they have great quickness and they have great skill. And when that ball's moving, when they're sharing the ball, when A.J. Hoggart is on his game, and he's kind of I got another X factor, but he's kind of up and down. If he's on his game, this team plays at a different level. When he's getting to the paint, when he's spraying it around, Joey Hauser has played at a high level this year. He's a confident Joey Hauser. They need Malik Hall, too. They need all hands on deck to be playing well. They have the pieces, and with that experience, with their skill, I think they're a very dangerous team because they can go for 70, 80 plus points. So we'll see if they can find that rhythm, play with some more pace, and play their game here.
There were some uncomfortable moments with Hoggard and Tom Izzo in the Big Ten tournament, so you hope that's been ironed out and they can move it forward. You mentioned X Factor. Where would you go with that?
If it's not Hoggard, it's Jaden Akins, averaging just under 10 points a game, shooting over 40% from 3. But he's a guy, he's got, a former Spartan, Shannon Brown. He's got that type of athleticism, I think. He's a guy that can slash, that can play in the open court, that can overwhelm opponents with his quickness and his speed that they don't quite have. But he's a guy he's trending up. They were high on him in the offseason, started the season with an injury, took him some time to kind of find his rhythm. Well, he's found it now. He's playing 15 plus a game over the last 4, so playing his best basketball here in March. I like that for the Spartans.
Have won at least one game in 8 of their last 10 NCAA tournaments. What about Illinois? They're in that dreaded 8-9 game. We have seen them at their top end this year, and I know that we have harped on these wins over UCLA and Texas a lot.
Long time ago.
They were a long time ago, but I still look at it, Trent, and I think that's what this team can be. And if you can beat those 2 teams, Texas, look, they had to make kind of a crazy run at the end of the game. They were fortunate to win it. UCLA, though, different story. I mean, they really, I thought they played extremely well in that game. They proved to be clearly, I thought, the better team on that day, and we've seen what UCLA has done the rest of the year here, ending up as a 2 seed and in the discussion for a 1 seed. So I think that shows you what Illinois can be at its best. The question is, hey, those games were a long time ago, as you said. How do you recapture it? How can you be that team here and make some sort of a run here?
These 8-9 games, it's always like the underachieving high major teams. And that's exactly what Illinois is in some ways. I think that's what Arkansas is. They are loaded with talent. It's interesting, those games, UCLA, Texas, even recently Northwestern, Purdue, they weren't very good in the first half. Found themselves in big holes and then came back in the second half. Won that one against Northwestern recently. Can they put a 40-minute effort together? I think is important for them. What I look is for Illinois is you have this talent we've talked about all season. They've talked about them being built, made for March. Well, here we are. We're in March. Let's see if you can put something together. I do like I do like their potential. Now we're right at that moment of let's see if you can realize it. For me, it's all about putting pressure defensively on the opponent's backcourt. They have the number of guys, whether it's Sincere Harris off the bench, Ty Rodgers, Coleman Hawkins can play 94 feet. They have so many guys that can put pressure on teams defensively. So I want to see them pick up the pressure defensively. And then offensively, I want them to put that pressure. I'm just thinking of pressure with this Illinois team on the rim. Okay, They shoot a boatload of threes. They're not a good three-point shooting team.
No, they're not.
Attack the basket. Get into the paint. Get to the free throw line. Attack the offensive glass. When this team is doing that, they're very dangerous. Because you go down the line, whether it's Ty Rodgers as a freshman, whether it's obviously Terrence Shannon, electric in the open court, getting downhill. Matt Meyer, he can get hot from three. I think he's more effective in the paint. Great footwork. RJ Melendez slashing, Dane Danger. I mean, they have so many guys that can be effective, but that's got to be their mindset. Okay, we're going to attack defensively with pressure, and then offensively, we're going to attack the paint.
It's interesting because in the game in the Big Ten tournament against Penn State, Brad Underwood was coming off the floor at the end of the first half, and he was interviewed by the Big Ten Network, and he said, sometimes we have this tendency to shoot too many threes. And you're kind of like, well, I mean, you're in the postseason now,
Yes.
right? Like, how has that message not gotten through to some of these guys? And so you do wonder a little bit, because I certainly Brad is acutely aware of it. He's talked about it all year. I'm sure he has emphasized it time and time again to the guys, and you just kind of wonder why they haven't heeded that message. But maybe they will now. There's always hope that they will, until the moment comes where it's clear they haven't.
I think a coach doesn't want to limit his guys, doesn't want to make them hesitant, but hey, those players, they're smart. They have to know what a good shot is, what's not a good shot. I think Coleman Hawkins especially, he's a guy that he can be so good. Does so many valuable things for this team, but his shot selection can be questionable at times.
See if they can make it out of the first weekend. 2005, last time they did it. That was the year, of course, they played for the national title under our friend and colleague, Bruce Weber, who gets mentioned twice early on. Unanimous AP first team All-American. The Hawkeye star named to the first team for the second straight year. She and South Carolina's Leah Boston, the two unanimous picks on that first team. Congratulations as well to Maryland's Diamond Miller. She is a second-team pick. Mackenzie Holmes of Indiana, a first-team pick as well. So the Big Ten with two first-teamers as well as the second-teamer in Diamond Miller. On the men's side, no Big Ten team has been to more NCAA tourneys than Indiana. No Big Ten team has won more tournaments than Indiana. 5 all-time for the Hoosiers. Only 3 schools have won more: UCLA, Kentucky, and North Carolina. It's been 36 years, though, since IU's last title. And Trent, this kind of feels like a theme with a lot of the Big Ten teams, but when they've been good this year, they've been real good. And so now the question becomes, how can you be real good for 2, 3, 4, 5, or ideally 6 games and make a deep run in this tournament? So how about the Hoosiers?
That's what's tough to do, to have that consistency night in, night out over 6 quality opponents. One thing for them is making shots. They're in their last 5 losses, they're 15 for 61 from 3. So only making 3 threes a game. It's tough to win basketball games when you're not shooting the ball well. That's critical for them. I like this team, though, because every time they step on the floor, they can feel like, hey, we got the best big man on the floor in Trace Jackson Davis, probably the best player on the floor, and we have the best guard in Jalen Hood-Schifino. And when you boast that, I think that bodes really well for you. Trace Jackson Davis, he needs, this is his time to step up. Did not win a Big Ten title, and now you're here in the NCAA tournament. Let's see what he can do. Similar to Zach Edey, where teams haven't quite seen a player like him. Lefty, incredibly quick and explosive in the low post. I think there's going to be a shock and awe trying to match up with him. And then Jalen Hood-Schifino, how he's emerged this season, how he's improved this season. I think from the point guard position, that's critical. He's been clutch. I love that. He wants the ball in the closing moments. He's delivered on the big stage. I think he's ready for this. I think that bodes really well for the Hoosiers. Now an X factor for them. I mentioned the shooting. Obviously Miller Kopp, Tamar Bates. They need these guys making shots. Race Thompson as well. I think it's Trey Galloway, though. Here's a guy, only 2 points in the 2 games in Chicago recently. He's going to guard the opponent's best perimeter player. Kent State's got a good guard, Sincere Carey, so he's got his work cut out for them. But he's a guy, when he's playing with emotion, with energy, with a swagger, I think this Indiana team is at a different level, so Trey Galloway is going to have to step up, complement the other shooters and their go-to guys.
We talk about Indiana and being in the most NCAA tournaments of any Big Ten team. Northwestern obviously has been in the fewest. This is just their second ever.
Let's go.
What do you think about the Wildcats, a team that, again, I almost feel like a broken record, but this is a team that's beaten Indiana twice, a team that's beaten Purdue. They won at Michigan State. They've won some real high-level games. So how do you put that together? How do you be that team that you were when you won 3 straight games at home successively against Purdue and Indiana and then manhandled Iowa. How can you get back to being that team and not the team they've been here the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, some of these games they come down to 1 or 2 possessions, and that's how close the margin is. I love that they have experienced guards and they got to dominate games. Boo Buie is playing great. Chase Audige, obviously, he hasn't played great as of recently on the offensive end. But if those guards can control the game, can win their matchups, that sets them up really well. Because with Northwestern, they have a distinct style. I like teams, you come into a tournament, and this is how they play. Teams are going to have to adapt to them. Defensively, they're so aggressive, not full court, but in the half court. I mean, they really cause opponents fits. How they post trap, I don't care if you have a go-to player in the post or not. They're going to bring the heat there, and they rotate very well. They get you playing a different. You're not really running your sets because all of a sudden now you're playing out of ball reversals. They scramble well. You're playing out of closeouts, and they're very good in that. They play with great energy and great discipline. That combination makes it tough for opponents.
I do wonder a little bit, and this is really not exclusive to Northwestern. I just think this is more about the NCAA tournament in general, and the Big Ten, as we know, is a physical league. You wonder whether an X factor is how the game is officiated. Right, that how much are you able to use the physicality that we see a lot in the Big Ten? And again, I'm not saying that's unique to Northwestern, but that is a big part of what they do. And I think it'll be interesting because in the NCAA tournament, frankly, look, the officials they're all judged, and then as to whether or not you move on, part of it is how closely your calls align with those that those who are supervising you see. So I don't know. I do think that's interesting, and we'll see. I'm always fascinated to see how the tournament is called versus how the regular season is called, not just in the Big Ten, but in leagues throughout the country.
That will be interesting. I think that is an X factor, especially for a physical team like Northwestern. I'll give you an X factor player, though. I think Brooks Barnhizer, he's been in double figures the last 6 games, playing at a really high level. He gives them another guy that can go get you a bucket, and I think that's so important. He's a physical wing, can work in the paint, is shooting the ball well, so that's an X factor if he continues to play at a really high level. Now, if Audige can raise his game too, this team is dangerous.
Yeah, he's been really good lately. 2 straight double-doubles. He'd never had a double-double in his career, and he puts together 2 straight at the end of the year. So we were talking about this yesterday, Ray Fell and I were, about you have that third scorer that has emerged now. Now you just need your second scorer in Audige to be a little bit better than he's been. I'm fascinated to see how they do. They are, of course, the only Big Ten team that's never lost a game in the round of 64. They are undefeated. They're perfect 1-0 all time in that round. So we'll see whether or not they can continue that trend. We saw Penn State catch fire here over the last few weeks. How can the Nittany Lions carry that forward into the tournament?
I think it's really important. They out-rebounded in the Big Ten tournament, Illinois, Northwestern, and Indiana. If they can control the boards, they take care of the ball. That really sets themselves up because they want to just control the pace, the flow of the game. It all starts with Jalen Pickett, and Micah Shrewsbury is interesting, sitting behind him in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, he is directing traffic. He's getting this matchup. He's a mastermind. So I love Micah Shrewsbury in this moment, kind of picking his mismatches, who he wants to attack. And they're such a unique team, why they can make a run, how they shoot the 3-ball. So many deadly weapons. Seth Lundy has been lights out all season. Obviously, Andrew Funk. Kanye Clary in moments, Miles Dredd. So they space the floor. This is a team that, Buzz Williams, I love Buzz. He's not looking forward to this matchup and game planning for this team. And obviously, Jalen Pickett and how he plays, his intelligence, his creativity. This team, we've talked about it all season. If they get into March, they can be dangerous. Let's see what they can do. It might just come down to making or missing shots. They usually get quality looks, so I'm thinking they're trending up. They've been playing well. Those shots are going to fall.
Oh, they have been playing great, and I agree with you 100%. We've talked a lot about this on this show, that they are one of those teams that feels like is built for March, and we saw it early in the Big Ten tournament. But I think particularly when you go up against a team like this that is unusual, it becomes a very difficult prep, and we saw even the Big Ten teams who have played them this year still weren't able to solve that. I mean, Illinois, they beat them 3 times. They tried all kinds of different approaches against them, but Penn State had their number. They've won 8 of the last 10 here. You mentioned a couple X factors along the way here. Is there an X factor for Penn State?
There's a lot of guys who can get loose. I think Cameron Winter, though, he's been really clutch in recent weeks. This is a guy, 16-point per game scorer at Drexel, big-time scorer. He's another ball handler. He can create for himself as well. So when you have so many weapons, Nobody's focused on Cameron Winter, but then he has the ability to go get you some buckets. So I think he is the X factor for them.
It's interesting. I think we've seen Clary, you mentioned him. He's really emerged here too. And you feel like, particularly with the recruiting class they have coming in next year, I know this is a really old team, but you're starting to see this mold that Micah Shrewsbury is putting together. You don't want to look past this season. Again, I think we both feel like they can win a couple games here, but you look forward and you start to understand his vision for this program.
I love what Micah Shrewsbury is doing. And he seems to have the motivational side on point, where he's a great motivator of young men and he's got that culture built up, but also schematically, he's been with Matt Painter, he's been with Brad Stevens. What he does offensively, how he's willing to play a different style of game. I love what he's doing there in Happy Valley.
And again, as you say, in the immediate term, getting past Texas A&M, a team that the consensus seems to be was wildly underseeded. I still think Penn State was a little underseeded as well. You got to rebound. This is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. They don't necessarily shoot it great, but man, they'll go after it and get it. So that is the challenge here for Penn State. See whether or not they can pull it off. A team that amazingly was 6-9 in the Big Ten heading into Valentine's Day, and here they are in the Big Ten tournament.
Big Ten Today is presented by Old National Bank, official bank of the Big Ten Conference.
The NCAA Wrestling Championships start tomorrow in Tulsa. Penn State in search of its 10th team title in the last 12 seasons. Iowa's Spencer Lee, a heavy favorite to capture his 4th national title, while 3 Penn State wrestlers can make it 3 in a row. Big Ten has utterly dominated this event, as you probably know, winning the last 15 team titles. Big Ten Network's Shane Sparks joining us now from the BOK Center in Tulsa, where they will compete starting tomorrow. And Shane, is it safe to assume the Big Ten is once again poised for a big weekend here?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, Dave. Last time a team outside the Big Ten won this was back in 2006. That was Oklahoma State. But as you saw, Penn State going for their 10th title in 12 tournaments. Last year, the Big Ten went 1-2-3 in Penn State, Michigan, and Iowa. I like the Big Ten's chances to take 2 or 3 more trophies back after these championships.
Have 5 number 1 seeds out of the 10 weight classes. Let's focus on Penn State a little bit. For people who don't follow wrestling that closely, put this dominance into perspective. I mean, to me, it's just crazy, right? You win 9 of 11 national championships. How does that stack up with the best runs ever in the history of this sport?
Yeah, it's one of the best runs in the history of this sport. You look at some of those Hawkeye teams in the 80s. They were phenomenal. They at one time won 9 straight before that streak was broke by Jim Gibbons and Iowa State in the late 80s. But this streak has been fantastic. And the reality is, Dave, it's far from over. I mean, it's year in, year out, consistency, team titles, individual titles. They've won 5 individual titles on a couple occasions in the last 5 years. I mean, this stuff is just unheard of. And so much talent. They got a great culture, phenomenal coaching staff, and this Nittany Lion train is not coming off the tracks anytime soon. It's pretty fantastic.
They are the only Division I program to win a national title at every weight class in the last decade. So some of the numbers are just staggering. Let's get into some of the individuals. Spencer Lee, I think even people who don't follow wrestling at all know about Spencer Lee. I think part of it has to do with him going viral when he revealed he won a national championship on 2 torn ACLs a few years ago. That was one of the all-time great moments. He's looking to make it 4 in a row. He'd be the first Hawkeye ever to do that. He'd be just the 5th wrestler ever to do it nationally, win 4 straight national championships. Again, Iowa's program has been incredible through the years. If Spencer Lee becomes the first Hawkeye to win 4 individual national championships, is he therefore the greatest wrestler in Iowa history? Like, where does he stand here, Shane?
Well, one thing we know about Iowa, it's all about winning. And to be the first guy to ever win 4 national championships, I mean, that definitely is going to put him in the conversation. I think most Hawkeye fans and most wrestling fans across the country would say, yeah, you won 4 titles and you are the greatest. You are the GOAT in that all-black singlet. His dominance is what is so staggering. He's got 95 career victories. He's won 55 straight. In those 55 matches, Dave, over that winning streak, he's outscored his opponents 6 140-73. I mean, it's crazy. The guys pinned 4 of the top 10 guys in the country this season, dominating with the bonus points, the pins. Just a special talent, carries himself extremely well off the mat as well. Just a great representative for this program, and he'll look to join that group of 4-time individual national championships. He's got 5 to go. It won't be easy, but he can smell it.
It's a group, by the way, that includes Cale Sanderson, who did it at Iowa State. He, of course, is the coach of Penn State, and he's got a great wrestler in Roman Bravo Young, looking for his 3rd straight title, potentially facing superstar Dayton Fix of Oklahoma State. Give us a little handicapping on that matchup, assuming that it happens.
Yeah, Roman Bravo Young has just gotten so good. I mean, when he came to Penn State, he was very talented, 4-time undefeated state champion from Arizona. Where he's really evolved, though, I think, is his fundamentals. I mean, he is so stingy, very good on his feet. He's as good as anybody in the country on his feet, but he's also shown he can be really tough in that top position. Spencer Lee has won 55 straight. Roman Bravo Young has won 52 straight. If he wins another national title, he might have to beat Dayton Fix of Oklahoma State. He's beaten Dayton Fix the previous 2 titles. Dayton Fix is a 4-time Big 12 champion. He is a 3-time NCAA finalist. He fell to Nick Suriano of Rutgers a few years back before falling to RBY twice. And he's also a world silver medalist. So for Roman Bravo Young, if he has to beat him for a 3rd time, I think that's only been done in the history of college wrestling one other time, where one guy had to beat a guy 3 times. That was in the mid-'60s. So pretty rare feat could be accomplished by Roman Bravo Young, and he's another one of those guys. He'll go down as an all-time great.
And Fix will, too. I mean, your heart almost goes out to him, right? This guy's lost 4 matches in his career, and yet he's still looking for that breakthrough. He's undefeated this year, and so that should be fabulous if, in fact, it comes down to those 2 again. What about Real Woods at 141, the Stansford transfer for Iowa? He, again, transferred in. He became the Big Ten champion. He said, hey, I was looking to come to the place that could help make me a national champion, and he's got a great chance to do it here. How has he fit in with this Iowa team?
He has fit in perfectly. Came from Stanford, as you mentioned, 2-time Pac-12 champion, 2-time All-American, comes to Iowa City. And keep in mind, Iowa's had really good luck at 141 in that transfer portal. They got Jaden Ironman from Missouri to come to Iowa City. But Real Woods, he really reminds me a lot of Spencer Lee. I mean, I think the Spencer Lee effect is clearly seen with the way Real Woods wrestles. Really good first periods. He's good on his feet, and as you see right there, with those tilts, can score a lot of bonus points, a lot of tilt points on the 4-point near fall. So Real Woods, I think he is poised at 141 pounds. He's undefeated. He's the number 1 seed. Now he's a Big Ten champion. Could be interesting. He could get Brock Hardy, the number 4 seed. That would be a rematch of the Big Ten final. Woods has beat Hardy twice this season, but that was really close in the Big Ten final. So win one of these, Dave. You got to win 5 matches. You got to beat really good guys. You really got to be kind of a unicorn to win this thing.
I think that's what's so amazing to me, Shane, and we were just talking about it here a moment ago with Fix, but it's amazing when you look at the records of these guys who you have to beat to win the national title. And, they've lost once all year. They haven't lost all year. It is just remarkable. And that's what happens when you get to a national championship level tournament, I suppose. But it is pretty amazing. 165, really competitive, really loaded. What are the Big Ten's chances in that weight class?
This weight class, Dave, 165 pounds, has 3 national champions in the weight class. You have the reigning national champion, Keegan O'Toole from Missouri. David Carr was a national champion 2 years ago at 157 pounds. Now he's up to 165, where he is the number 1 seed. He's undefeated, champion of the Big 12 4 times. And then you have Shane Griffith, who all but saved the Stanford wrestling program in St. Louis in 2021. He won his title at 165. And then you have Quincy Monday at 165, up from 157. He was a national finalist last year, fell to Northwestern's Ryan Deacon in that final. So much talent. But Dean Hamady of Wisconsin, All-American last year as a true freshman. This year won the Big Ten title. You got Patrick Kennedy of Iowa in that mix as well. Dean Hamady is interesting because he's long. He's got some length, long arms, can cause some challenges. Really good in scrambles. He's got a little bit of funk to him. So Dean Hamady is a guy. I just mentioned so much talent. But Dean Hamady is not going to make it easy on anybody. And we know this, Dave. you look at the numbers, and at the end of the day, some of this stuff is pretty predictable, I guess, to a certain level. But there's always a guy or two that kind of shocks the world. Maybe Dean Hamity's that guy that could shock the world.
He comes in as the 3 seed. You've only got one senior among the top 16 seeds in that weight class, so it should be entertaining, not just this year, but for years to come. We mentioned Bravo Young already. Penn State has 3 other returning national champions. Take us through those 3 guys and kind of what their path is to win another national title.
Carter Starachi has won 47 straight, 2-time reigning national champion. To win those national titles, he had to beat Michael Kemmer a couple years ago of Iowa. He avenged a loss from the Big Ten Finals. And then last year, he beat Mekhi Lewis of Virginia Tech. Mekhi Lewis won the national title down at 165 back in 2019. That was a really close match last March in Detroit in that national final with Starachi and Lewis. That's the number 2 seed. The number 3 seed is Mikey Labriola of Nebraska. Starachi beat him to win the Big Ten title. Starachi is just so tough. I'm not sure if there's anybody between the ears that's as tough as Carter Starachi, but he's going to have his work cut out for him, as all these guys will. 184, Aaron Brooks is the number 3 seed. The 2-time reigning national champion. I think you could make a case he's the best wrestler in this field, at least from a skill set standpoint. So 74 and 84, those guys are going for their 3rd. 197, Max Dean is the reigning national champion at 197. He's the 9 seed. 197, Dave, is so deep. This weight class is pretty chaotic. To put into perspective how good 197 is, in the Big Ten, that was a Big Ten final with Silas Allred of Nebraska, who beat Max Dean. That's an 8-9 matchup. Typically, when you see Big Ten finals rematches, oftentimes you will get them at the national tournaments in the semifinals. The fact that we're getting a Big Ten rematch, possibly, between a 9 and an 8 with the reigning national champion and Dean, and that could happen Thursday night in round 2, that sums up 197. So the Nittany Lions, 74, 84, 97, all with guys that have done this before. Starachi and Brooks looking for number 3.
Is that the deepest class, 197, Shane?
Yes, hands down, 197. A first-round matchup at 197, Jacob Warner of Iowa, 4-time All-American, 23rd in program history, national finalist. He fell to Max Dean of Penn State in the national final last March. Warner is a 14 seed. His first match is against Cameron Caffey of Michigan. He was down at 184 a couple years back. In the COVID year, he was an All-American by the NWCA. That's a first-round matchup. Cameron Caffey, extremely dangerous. He's very, very good. That's Jacob Warner's first-round match. An all-Big Ten first-round collision at 197. I mean, 197, you better be ready. Whoever wins that title at 197, that'll be a few days they'll remember for decades to come.
Should be fantastic. Looking forward to watching this weekend and seeing if the Big Ten comes away with yet another national title, all these individual titles as well. Shane, incredible job covering Big Ten wrestling for us all year, and thanks for taking some time out on what I know is a really busy weekend to shed some light on it here going into the weekend.
I am living the dream, Dave, and thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about Big Ten wrestling. It doesn't get any better. It is the nation's premier conference. It's the Big Ten, baby.
Back on Big Ten today, 29th NCAA Tourney appearance for Iowa and 4th straight. That is the longest streak since the late 1980s when Dr. Tom Davis was the head coach. And a fellow named Bruce Pearl was one of the assistants. Davis actually the last coach to get Iowa out of the first weekend. It has been nearly a quarter of a century. And, of course, Iowa facing Pearl and Auburn in round 1 in Birmingham, which is crazy, but I've been harping on that now for 3 days, so we won't make that the focus here. Instead, we'll kind of continue our theme here. What would it take for Iowa to make a bit of a run?
Well, for Iowa, it's all about pace, playing their brand of basketball, free-flowing, up and down, high-scoring affair. Looking at Auburn, looking at potentially Houston, that's not how those teams play. I think the key for Iowa is rebounding the ball. They do a great job of taking care of the ball. Can they rebound the ball, gang rebound on defense? If they do that, they're going to have more possessions in their favor. And when they get up and down the court, can Auburn, can even Houston hang with them? When they're playing their level of play, I don't know if those teams can. And they have that distinct style play, which I think suits a team as you get into the NCAA tournament. They got to make shots, But this team has the pieces, so many different offensive weapons, and they have a star player in Chris Murray who can go get you 20 and 10 every night. I like that. I think that bodes well for Iowa, but they got to make shots.
Fascinated by the contrast in styles here. And, of course, it's easier said than done making shots against Auburn. We know how good they have been defensively this year. Is there an X factor for Iowa?
For sure. There's a few guys that can get loose, right? But I think there's none other than Peyton Sanford. He's had 5 20-plus point games this season. He is a Klay Thompson-like shooter. You know, big guard, 6'7", high release point, quick trigger. I mean, every time the ball gets in his hands, his eyes are to the rim. I love watching a guy like that play, Dave. And so I think he's a guy that, you know, on the opponent's scouting report, I mean, they're circling him. Hey, we can't let this guy get off. The hard thing, though, is how they play. It's kind of random basketball, motion offense. You see guys in different spots on the floor, different players bringing the ball up the floor for Iowa. It's difficult to match up. And he's a guy that he sees one ball go in, and that rim just gets bigger. And it can be a long night for the opponent. So Peyton Sanford is definitely an X factor for Iowa.
Incredible how much better he has gotten during the course of this year after that really rocky start to the Big Ten season, but became a huge force for them, particularly when they had it rolling kind of in the middle of the Big Ten year. So that is the matchup for Iowa going up against Auburn. And then, as you said, likely against Houston, were they to win. Obviously, you never assume anything in the NCAA tournament. It's interesting. I interviewed Tubby Smith last night. We were at a charity event, a Coaches versus Cancer charity event. And we were going through the bracket kind of as a means of getting people fired up for the NCAA tournament. And I said to him, who is the coach in this bracket that you least enjoyed playing against? And his answer was Bob Huggins. And that is what Maryland is up against here in round one. Obviously, a very difficult system to prepare for in West Virginia. That being said, we've seen Maryland, when they're at their best, be really good this year. What do they need to do to get past Huggins and maybe make a run of their own?
Yeah, both of these teams have been battle-tested. West Virginia in the Big 12 Conference. And this is maybe a better scoring team. You know, all 4 of their stars in double figures. Joe Toussaint, probably a good matchup against Jameer Young on the defensive end. But for Maryland, it's always about playing with an edge and being the aggressor. And they've done that when they've been at home. Now, can they do that away from home? We haven't really seen that so much this year. But when they're getting up and taking the game to the opponents, playing 94 feet of defense, this team can be very difficult to play against. I love their versatility. And I look at their versatility, one, defensively. They play a lot of different styles. They'll press. They'll play zone. They'll play zone, then switch up mid-possession into man-to-man, and vice versa. And I think that versatility, they can defend different teams. The individual pieces defensively, whether it's Hakeem Hart, Ian Martinez, Dante Scott, Julian Reese, even Jameer Young, they're all quick. They can all move their feet. They can guard multiple positions. So I love the versatility from Maryland. And then on the offensive end, these guys are versatile pieces as well. Dante Scott's the perfect example. Inside, outside. I think Hakeem Hart, we talk X factors, he's an X factor for them. You know, this is an experienced team. Hakeem Hart's an experienced player. Here you are in the big dance. He's had moments. He can guard multiple positions. He can be a mismatch on offense because he can post up. He can shoot the three. He can go off the bounce. So I like they can beat you in different ways. The key is you got to be the aggressor. You got to have that foot on the accelerator. And that matchup against West Virginia, you know those teams are going to battle.
Can't turn it over,
yes.
Clearly, right? And it's interesting, too, as you see teams evolve over the course of the year. I had Kevin Willard's team against Iowa, kind of early, middle Big Ten season, and he talked a lot about the pick sixes, right? Like they were turnovers that were leading to early baskets for the opposition. It became such a point of emphasis for them. And to their credit, they have cut down on that significantly. But this is one of those games where if that starts rearing its head, you can be in real trouble.
There's no doubt. And with their experience, they should handle this stage well. I think Jameer Young, he's had a fabulous career, big-time scorer. Now on a winning team, had a great year this year. Can he deliver in the big dance? I think he's ready for it. And I like their experience. This is a tough matchup.
And again, were they to win this game, much as Iowa does have to play Auburn in Birmingham, Maryland would have to play Alabama likely in Birmingham. Well, it would definitely be in Birmingham. It would likely be against Alabama. And I guess there you understand it, right? Like Alabama earned the right to play in Birmingham.
So much about
Auburn, not so much.
For Auburn, yeah.
Yes. Back on Big Ten today as we wrap things up here. Wanted to catch you up on the NIT scores from last night. Unfortunately, Rutgers saw its season come to an end as they fell in overtime at home to Hofstra. Two other Big Ten teams got wins, though. Kobe Buffkin pouring in 23 for Michigan in a win over Toledo. And how about Stephen Crowell? 36 points, 9 rebounds as the Badgers pounded Bradley 81-62. Our big stat brought to you by Old National Bank. Zach Edey named a unanimous AP All-American yesterday. Trace Jackson-Davis on the first team as well. 1 year after the Big Ten had 3 first-teamers. Edey, as you can see, also named the National Player of the Year. So the second time in 3 seasons a Big Ten player has been so honored by the AP. Jalen Pickett, by the way, made the second team. Chris Murray made the third. One of the things that I think has been incredible here in recent years is just this parade of superstars that we have had in the Big Ten, and it continued this year. 40% of the first-team All-Americans coming out of this league.
I think it's great to see. Maybe historically speaking, or at least maybe in the past 20 years or so, you might not have thought of the Big Ten as being where stars come to play, but in recent years, that's been the case. And it's great to see them being awarded with these honors of being All-Americans. Zach Edey established himself as the National Player of the Year front runner early in the season with dominant performances against Gonzaga, Duke, and he never let up. 32-14 and 30-13 in his last 2 games. He played well early. He's played well throughout, been incredibly consistent, has been clutch in moments. And so I love to see those guys being rewarded. Big-time season, and we'll see how they can perform on the big stage of the NCAA Tournament.
It's crazy to think of Edey and the numbers that he puts up that really have become almost routine in our eyes. He's now had 8 30-10 games this year. Purdue had 5 in the last 25 years total. I mean, it's just remarkable how good he is. Do you believe that he and Jackson Davis are the 2 best players in the country?
I think so. I think there was an argument for Trace Jackson-Davis to share the Big Ten Player of the Year award.
Right.
Who's most important to their team? I mean, TJD is right up there. I thought what I love to see from Jackson-Davis this year was his playmaking ability. Over 4 assists a game. I thought that changed the game for the Indiana Hoosiers. I didn't see that in previous years in the post. And what I love, too, especially when he gets the defensive rebound and pushes the ball up the court, that gives a different element to Indiana. So his development in his 4th year was very impressive.
Thrilled for Jalen Pickett and Chris Murray as well. It's been really neat to see Pickett get this recognition here. I mean, here's a kid who had 0 offers out of high school, went to prep school and barely got any offers out of there, went to Siena, and then has come to Penn State and has just emerged as one of the best players in the country. And then for Chris Murray, he had been overshadowed last year by his brother. To see him kind of emerge fully this year and garner the spotlight, 2 really good stories.
Well-deserved. Jalen Pickett, one of the toughest and also most intelligent players in the country. I mean, I thought this all year long. He can control the game with his unique ability to post up and pass the ball and his mind, how he thinks the game. He controls it better than anyone in the country, in my eyes. Had the best performance of the year, 41 points, 8 assists against Illinois. And Chris Murray's a guy that I think will excel at the next level because he doesn't need the ball to be successful. He scores in a variety of ways, posting up, running the floor, coming off stagger screens. He's developing his game off the bounce, so does it in so many ways. Versatile, 2-way player as well. All 4 of those guys are very well deserving.
Again, as a parent of twins, I understand you don't want to compare them.
We both are.
Yes, we both are. However, I will say his brother has done pretty well at the next level and a very similar skill set. So I think it bodes well for Chris Murray.
I know their dad, Kenyon, former Hawkeye, and he's incredibly proud from great man, great family. It's really cool to see.
No doubt. Unbelievable stuff. I cannot wait for tomorrow. Should be a blast. We'll be here an hour earlier than normal to preview it. See you then on Big Ten Today.